Good day to everyone, and welcome to our informative demo webcast, Statistica 13.2, the game changer of advanced analytics, presented by Shawn Rogers and Burk. My name is Paul Hiller on the global marketing team for Statistica, and I have the pleasure of serving as your MC for the next hour or so. Before we get started, here are a couple of things to keep in mind during the presentation. This webcast is being recorded, and the recorded version, along with the presentation materials, will be sent to you in a follow-up email early next week. We will conduct Q&A toward the end of the presentation. Well, actually, you can submit questions anytime during the presentation, but we'll get around to answering as many as possible toward the end. It's our goal, of course, to make this productive and worthy of your time. So just enter your questions in the Q&A box on your screen, and we'll get to as many of them as possible. You can enter your questions at any time. Now I'll take a minute to introduce our topic and our presenters. As we were planning the content for this webcast, Burk observed that the impact of Statistica's advanced analytics features could be likened to the impact of Johann Gutenberg's printing press of yesteryear, a device, of course, that changed forever the way that information would be exchanged, the speed at which information would be spread, and the scope of the audience that could actually engage with that information. Like power to the people, right? So by anticipating the trends and needs of modern businesses, Statistica's introduction of practical and simple features, especially in our latest versions 13.1 and especially 13.2, enables more of today's masses to participate in the data economy, mirroring the same game-changing consequence instigated by Gutenberg over 500 years ago. So in this webcast, Shawn and Scott will revisit the trends of today that have shaped the evolution of Statistica's unique analytics methodology. And for all you hands-on practitioners out there that like to watch and learn, Scott will demonstrate how easily Statistica can foster the creation of actionable results in 3 key areas. So let me introduce our speakers. Shawn Rogers is the Chief Research Officer and Director of Global Marketing and Channels for Statistica. Let me get them up there on screen. There they are. Shawn's internationally recognized thought leader, speaker, author, and instructor on topics such as big data, analytics, cloud, and data integration, data warehousing, and social analytics. Got more than 19 years of hands-on IT experience and used to be Vice President of Research for Business Intelligence and Analytics at Enterprise Management Associates, a leading analyst firm. And he co-founded the Bay Network, which is a global publication covering business intelligence, data warehousing, and analytics, and was also a partner at DM Review magazine. Joining Shawn today is Dr. Scott Burk, who's got graduate degrees in finance and data mining and a doctorate in statistics, and has been solving challenging business and healthcare problems for over 20 years through science, statistics, and computational methods. He's held a variety of executive and senior level positions in finance, IT, statistics, and marketing. And prior to joining us, he was Associate Vice President and Chief Statistician at Scott & White Health Plan, and was also the Chief Statistician at Overstock.com, worked for companies you recognize like Texas Instruments, PayPal, eBay, and various startups. He's also had faculty positions at Texas A&M, Baylor University in Texas, and currently teaches in the City University of New York Master's Data Analytics, and Northwestern University Master's Predictive Analytics program. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn the program over to Shawn Rogers, and we'll continue. Shawn?
Thanks, Paul. Go ahead and let me have the presenter reins, and I'll put myself on my first slide. Good morning, everybody. As Paul mentioned, with the reference to the printing press being a disruptive technology, I certainly think that advanced analytics could certainly be labeled the same way today, and there's an awful lot changing in the industry that's making it even more important and more critical. As I'm sure everyone on today's call knows, advanced analytics isn't brand new. It's been in the industry for a very long time. What's really changed recently are the motivations around the users, some of the technology, and we're going to talk about that today, and Scott's going to show you some examples. But we're really kind of at a tipping point around advanced analytics, and there's a few things that are shifting us in that direction, and I'd like to start out the session today by just highlighting a few of them. Companies right now are coming not so much to an end, but hitting the maturity arc on their investment of big data or all data. And that's certainly a shift that we've seen in all of our customers here at Statistica. Companies are now introducing more information than ever into their data ecosystems, and they are looking for that return on investment, all of that money that they spent turning on and accessing all of the rest of the data that they didn't perhaps have in their ecosystem prior. Companies now are looking for ways to get better value from it, and I think that's certainly something that's motivating enterprise companies to look at advanced analytics for more value. The BI folks, or business intelligence applications that have been in the marketplace for a very long time, have done a nice job of bringing people down that path, but the ability to look historically at your information is important, but perhaps even more so is being able to look forward into with your information to predict and better understand how your business is going to perform is something that we see a lot of our customers going towards. So there's this shift of trying better to democratize the access to this insight. More people are pounding on the door of our data science customers and asking for help and the ability to maybe even perhaps serve themselves a bit. We're going to talk about that role a little today. There's new power users that are making new demands on more legacy platforms that are out there, which is why it's important that you look for analytic solutions that are keeping pace with these changes in the markets. And of course, there's this demand for repeatability and speed to value, and that's all kind of centric around this all data or big data investment companies have made. There's another shift that's really kind of interesting is that people aren't afraid of data anymore. There's kind of a no fear attitude towards the platforms that exist in the market, and from the business users and power users and citizen data scientists that are looking to take advantage of advanced analytics. So when you sort of have this rise of a brand new community who are demanding access to data and information, things really do start to shift and change dramatically. And we've really kind of entered a time of, this algorithm economy is really driving the business. So when you look across on how people are using advanced analytics today, it's changed remarkably from where it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was fairly common for a company to perhaps be infusing a few very critical processes with advanced analytics. Applying math to data was not something that happened at every turn and in every corner of the enterprise. It was only happening in specialty areas. But now companies are coming to rely upon algorithms, models, and the insights that are driven by advanced analytics in a way that they never have before, which I think is also causing a shift and putting a lot of pressure on vendors in the space, Statistica included, to stay ahead of those trends. The other piece that we see, kind of hearkening back to my first point around big data and the demand for ROI, data has a new home. Data is not moving as much as it used to, and there's a certain gravity that comes with our information today. Data is getting so large, it's getting impractical to move it. And because of that, being able to access data in a clear and concise manner, to assess the data, prepare the data, and to work with data really is a challenge that we're seeing with all of our customers. So as these hybrid environments have become more diverse and we see data sitting way out at the edge on IoT devices and industrial PCs and in the cloud and on Hadoop data lakes, all of these locations for data are becoming kind of a new home for it. And because of that, it's putting a lot of stress and strain on the providers in the space in the advanced analytics world to make the data side of this scenario a whole lot easier. So Scott's going to give you a demo. I think it's the first one we're going to discuss today around how and why you need to have a little bit better connectivity and integration around your data. And I'm also going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The other big trend that we've seen that's been disruptive to the space or perhaps empowering the space is this idea around open source technologies. And I'm sure many of you in the audience today are familiar with Python, familiar with R, and are looking for ways to continue to use that in your environment, but perhaps wrap those environments with a little bit more control, monitoring, and governance. And that's one of the places that Statistica shines quite well. We're in a lot of environments where this bring your own tool kind of culture exists where the data scientists are coming in using R, or they come in using Python or Python notebooks, and what they want to do is continue to use the authoring tool of choice, but then to be able to put algorithms and models into production in a more enterprise fashion. And Statistica does that for a lot of our customers, and it also opens up the door for our customers to leverage a wider community around open source, which I also think is important if you want to keep kind of track or pace with what's happening in the world today. So if you look at the trends that are disrupting advanced analytics, they are around getting return on your investment that companies have made around their data ecosystem. It's about empowering a wider group of users who may not be as algorithm savvy as a true data scientist. So getting this in the hands of a wider community is very important. Embracing the fact that companies are very much looking to leverage this algorithm economy and to drive their companies using this type of insight and action. The ability to tap into hybrid data worlds where you have to orchestrate data from one platform to the next, and perhaps most importantly, this ability to leverage your community and leverage the open source side of our world to bring the right tools into the environment. So these are things that the team here at Statistica keeps in mind and that we focus on a regular basis. And Scott's going to show you some demos today to perhaps put, I guess, proof to these points. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the biggest areas that I see as a challenge to most customers and why I think it's important that having data sourcing, data assessment, data prep, those types of tools really need to be integrated into your enterprise platform, because I know that most of you who are on the line today would agree that you spend an inordinate amount of time preparing data, accessing data, and manipulating and massaging data so that you can use it. And especially in a world where we're looking for some consistency and speed as the community of users gets larger, we also need to be able to tap into all of these types of data sources that the big data investment has given us. And as I mentioned up front, this means all data. So you have to be able to get to all the data, assess the data, and then understand how valuable that data is for your analytics and whether or not it's a good fit. But I also think that a lot of people spend too much time getting lost in that sort of black hole. The second point I have on this slide is don't use the wrong fuel to power your analytics, and the fuel is really the data. And if you're using incorrect data or you're not understanding a holistic view of the data or it's not prepared properly, all of you on today's call know that that will result in inaccurate and poor analytics. And obviously this works as a foundation, and that's why we wanted to start here today, because I think it's critical. If you're going to keep pace with the analytic market today, you want to find a platform that's got these types of tools built into it. It is an incredible waste of time, energy, and money manipulating data. I reference the Pareto principle here, the 80-20 rule, and this is not what you want to use as a template for your analytics. You don't want to spend 80% of your time working on manipulating and massaging data. You want to flip that model over and make the time that you spend with the data as small as possible and the time that you spend getting insight as large as possible. Unfortunately, many companies have a platform for their analytics, and they have separate platforms for data integration and data prep and data assessment and so on. And when that happens, you disconnect the workflow for the data scientist, and we think that it's important that you integrate it so that you can kind of flip this on its head. Making things repeatable is also becoming important, and a little later on we're going to talk about citizen data scientists, but we're also going to talk about scaling all of you data scientists. So if you're a data scientist and you're listening in today, I'm sure that you're feeling new pressure to perform. You know, a handful of years ago, data scientists didn't really get leveraged as much as they could have or should have. They worked on projects on their own or with a small team, and generally the business just reaped a benefit from them when they surfaced and explained some business insight that they had uncovered. Now the business is pounding on your door, and because they're pounding on your door, we feel it's important, at least here at Statistica, to help you manage that new workload and to enable you to serve a wider community. So we want to focus on making data access and data assessment more repeatable. We want to govern the data process, because in the end, when you have to enable a wider user community, if you have to do everything bespoke or by custom, that's no way to scale. And so you're going to see some things from Scott today throughout each of the short demos that'll explain to you how repeatable some of the processes are and how we allow citizen data scientists and a wider business community to come in, drag and drop pre-made templates onto workspaces, allow these folks to benefit from a data scientist but still act like a business person or citizen data scientist. Because in the end, if we add a little consistency and speed to the whole data processing side of this, you then create a higher level of trust and a higher level of accuracy in the analytics, which obviously then sort of feeds this wonderful loop of adoption as people become more reliant upon and trusting in the analytics that are helping drive their business. So I'm going to hand the reins to Scott here in just a second, but I just want to make this final point. If you're spending 80% of your time on data sourcing, assessment, and prep, start looking for an application, a solution that'll flip this 80-20 rule over for you. Look for repeatability, look for standardization and the ability to scale your efforts. And I think Scott's going to share a couple of those things with us as we move into this demo. So, Scott, I'll leave it to you.
Great. Thank you, Shawn. And what a great segue. I love the fuel analogy, and it goes right in with this workspace. Also, the repeatability, where within Statistica, you can create workflows and templates, which are reusable concepts. What I'm showing here is essentially the ability to source all of those different types of fuel within your organization, both very simplistic spreadsheets, Excel spreadsheets, flat files, wherever your data resides, and then the ability to aggregate and form the working data set that you have for analysis. So a lot of times you have to do this upstream, where you'll do all your work in, say, SQL or you know, some sort of method to join all of the data together, data munching. And within Statistica, you can actually source those data sets individually, and then you can bring them in and you can do your SQL-like statements within a workflow itself, or you can do simple things like create merge nodes where I can merge two different data sets together. So there's a lot of different options and methods to create these links and get the data within a usable set, and then provide downstream processes to look at the data quality, fixed data, and we're going to look at that in just a second. But also, just to let you know, I mean, the different types of data, again, from the simplest things like flat files, Excel spreadsheets, other different types of data that analysts and domain users typically have, to more complicated things like, you know, data lakes, Hadoop, HDFS, JSON. Basically, virtually any type can be brought in as a connector within Statistica. And we'll talk even about some API feeds, like, you know, bringing in weather data through an R node or holiday information. And we'll look at that more deeply in the next section. But the bottom line is, instead of having to munch this data together before doing analytics, we can create the data sources where we want them within the Statistica workflow. Also, I can work with these data sets interactively. And typically it's done kind of in a hybrid method where I can perform certain analyses on the data interactively, and then I can also create these reusable workflows. And I can share these workflows with other individuals. The other thing that is really nice about Statistica is that once I have these workflows, I can essentially secure them. I can lock them down. I can provide role permissions, etc. Let me show you just an example, and it's on the workspace that I currently have open. I have access permissions to that workflow, and I can let my certain colleagues in on that. I can assign read or write privileges at a role-based level or at a specific person by user ID, and then I can assign different permissions to those people. So it's not only about sourcing data, it's about securing your data, and it's about making that data available to the right people within your organization. And that comes with over 34 years of development within the Statistica platform. Another nice thing is, you know, with 13.2 is we've added, you can actually annotate several places within the platform, but I'm just showing here another way to annotate as well. So here I'm bringing in, I've added a couple of data sources, weather and holiday information versus open source APIs, and I'm just telling Susan that I've added these. And I can now deploy this object, as I just showed you, to Enterprise, and this is now a workspace object within Enterprise. But the options abound. I don't have to put this out to Enterprise. I can save this just as a file to my local machine, and not germane to this particular webinar, but we can demonstrate the ability to push to the edge, as Shawn alluded to earlier in the Internet of Things. So I'm going to shut down this space here, and let me open up another space and within Enterprise. So I'm going to go make a few comments and show you briefly some stuff about data cleaning. So we have a very rich set of tools to work with your data. It's all about, Statistica is really all about making you more productive, and then also providing a tool set, a platform that many different levels of users can use within the organization. We'll talk about citizen data scientists, but in general, we've created a number of tools to make you more productive, excuse me. One of the things that we've done is we have a rich set of tools to clean and look at the quality of data. So here what I'm doing is I'm just bringing in a simple result set from a SQL query. I am reformatting some data, and then I'm going to bring it into what we call this data health check summary node. And what the data health check allows you to do is it allows you to create a simple report of different types of errors that might exist within your data set. And you can look at that report and you can do your remedial work on your own, or the data health check summary will actually create a downstream document of the data that's been repaired. So here, highlighting some of the things that we can do, we can look at sparse data, both data that is sparse with missing data per variable and per case. And this is all configurable, so I can define what a sparse variable is. I can define what outliers are. I can define what invariance is. So I can run all of these different components, or I can uncheck them and not have these particular ones run. The other thing that's nice is the ability to do context-sensitive help. So if I go to, if I click on the little question mark at the top of the box, I get specific information on, not general, where I have to do a search, but very specific to what I'm doing at the time. I'm in the outliers panel within the data health check, and if I click on that little question box, it takes me directly to help for that particular topic. If I need to figure out what sparsity settings are, what they really are. So again, it's all about making you more productive in your work. So if I run that, I get a simple report, and I can also check for a downstream document. So it's the report itself. Let's take a look at that. I get a workbook that's combined in these different folders, right? So each component that I was looking at earlier is set into a separate folder, and then I get individual components within that folder. So right here, I've got a nice little summary. I used to do this thing by hand years ago. I would love to have had the data health check. It would have saved me literally days of work. So here, it's categorized the different types of variables. It tells me how many distinct values I have, gives me percent of sparseness, 2.87%, the number of cases. Here was based upon my criteria. One of the variables was removed due to sparseness. Outliers, what existed, 42 cases were removed for my settings. So I can look at these things, and as a Statistica user, I have two options. I can let the data health check create a downstream document that will clean all this up for me individually, or I can do it by hand. So if I create this downstream document here under results to apply data cleaning, and then I get a result set here, and I have 689 rows or cases now, and I'd started with just a little over 700. So I can now hook that document up immediately, and I'm just doing a plot here, but you can imagine I can hook this up to my modeling, anything that I want to do as a Statistica user downstream. Or I have a full set of options to do remedial work on this data. For example, process the missing outliers, recode the outliers. So if you look at under the data tab here within Statistica, you can see all sorts of things that we can do individually. Maybe I don't want, maybe I just want to do a piece. Maybe I want to filter duplicate cases. Maybe I want to filter sparse. Maybe I want to impute upon a variable. I don't want to throw that case away. I want to impute specific values. So all of this is available. Again, over 30 years that we've been doing this, we've built a very rich set of tools, everything from doing recoding, transforms, building rules, et cetera. So anyway, that provides you just a brief overview of some of the things that we can do in data sourcing, as well as remedial work on the data itself.
Thanks, Scott.
Hey, let me jump in here real quick, Scott, with a question that came in as opposed to waiting till the end, since we're kind of segmenting this into 3 parts. Somebody wanted to know if we could save the output in JSON format. He's using version 13.
Yes, there'd be a couple ways to do that. We'd love to have I mean, there's more than one option to be able to do that, but the answer is yes.
Okay. And just a reminder to the attendees that Scott's email address will be available at the end of this presentation, so you all can take stuff like that offline too. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Scott. I'm gonna jump into the second topic that as I mentioned up front in the trends. I think there's a few things in the open source world that if you're not already thinking about, you ought to be, and it's certainly a litmus test that you'd like to and should probably hold your analytic platform to as you're looking for the right solutions and ways to accomplish things. Embracing open source is something that has become extremely commonplace, and as I mentioned up front, we do live in this world of bring your own tools, and data scientists are certainly proud and very happy to bring their own tools to the workplace, whether it be Python or R or other types of open source technologies that help them do their jobs better. And so this idea of having data at the right place at the right time on the right platform to do the right job has become really very much a prevailing best practice nowadays. We're no longer trying to push data from one platform to another just because that platform is closer to the core or it's the system of record or so on. We now, as Scott did a great job of explaining this, analytic platforms have to be able to reach out to all of these data sources and then bring things into an environment that allows you to tie things together and bring it in. And these types of technologies are certainly a part of that scenario. So today's data scientists are really demanding the ability to have more flexibility, to author in programming languages and with tools that make them comfortable. And we think that it's very critical for advanced analytics platforms in the space is not to restrict or to act like a silo, but frankly to embrace and extend the capabilities of these open source technologies. And that might be through performance enhancement, it might be through governance and control, as I mentioned earlier. But the bottom line is as your company starts to leverage data science and advanced analytics in a more sort of pervasive manner, you're going to need your platform to keep pace with that. So you're going to want to be able to allow your data artists to be able to use the tool that they want to use, but then to be able to put a wrapper of enterprise capability around it, to distribute models and algorithms throughout hybrid environments, and to give a central location of control for monitoring and standardization. Because, of course, as it becomes more widespread, these are the tools that are going to make you be able to scale further forward. And scaling forward is, I think, a very important piece of what most companies are looking for today is how do I take that expensive, highly skilled data scientist, and I read once that some magazine was calling data scientists the unicorn job position, and I know some of you in the audience today have heard that one before. And scaling your unicorn is a very difficult thing to do. So you need a program or a solution that has things built into it that allows them to use their own tools, allows them to access the data in a smart and quick way like Scott just showed in the last demo, make it repeatable, make it deliverable to a wider community, and then at the same time you want to look for ways to save time for your data scientists. And a lot of companies are now starting to latch onto or leverage open marketplaces or algorithm marketplaces and libraries that are available all over the internet today. I've got logos for a couple of them. Algorithmia and Apurvita are two that Statistica works rather closely with. As you can see next to those logos, I included a little piece of something that Gartner released just a week ago, and Gartner predicts that by the year 2020, 30% of Industry 4.0 projects, and for those of you not familiar with Industry 4.0 as a term, they're referencing IoT projects, and in European markets, they're often called Industry 4.0. So these new analytically driven IoT projects, Gartner is already saying that these projects are going to be fueled by algorithms that come from marketplaces, 30% of them in the next handful of years. So this trend is going to grow, and what it amounts to is, and Scott will talk just a little bit about it in a minute or two, but it gives your data scientists the ability to port out and or to access an open marketplace and actually bring into Statistica a model that they can either alter or change or use as is. Instead of reinventing the wheel, the data scientist gets to leverage libraries and marketplaces that have hundreds, if not thousands, of different solutions that have already been built on them. And for those of you who are data scientists in the audience today, you know that some of the work we do with data is mundane and doesn't require reinventing things from scratch. And these types of open marketplaces are going to allow you to scale a lot quicker and get to the value proposition in a way that you couldn't do before, even just a handful of years ago. Gartner's also mentioned in their research that they expect that these particular platforms will soon outclass or overshadow any advanced analytics platform for number of mathematical functions and number of algorithms, and they'll all have to work kind of hard to surpass Statistica. We've got something like 16,000 functions built into our platform. But as time goes by, places like Aprovita and Algorithmia and others, these marketplaces are going to continue to grow and are going to become a great resource for data scientists to scale themselves and to be able to get to the value proposition faster. So we also think, as mentioned in the beginning today, that open source is playing a key role in the disruption of the space. You want to look for a platform that has the ability to embrace and extend these types of open source tools and platforms and communicate clearly with them. And you want to be able then to take advantage in the other direction where you can reach out into the open source space, tap into these communities and marketplaces, and scale up the people that are important on your team. So I think open source has been an interesting piece of technology for a while. It's going to continue to be that going into the future. Scott's going to show you a couple of things now in a short demo about how we extend and embrace these technologies, and I'll again give it to Scott to kind of show how Statistica dovetails into this.
Great. Thank you, Shawn. I love your quotes there. Scaling the unicorn, that fits right in with this demonstration space right here. This is the one that we saw previously, but I want to highlight a couple of different points here. The first thing that I'd like to say is, having created a lot of code to source data from ODBC, et cetera, in, say, R, and create data frames, define my variables, define what the variable types are, and create that all up front is a pretty tedious process. But again, with Statistica, you have direct connectors into all those forms of data. So it's very easy to source those data types. However, if you want to source something from, let's say, an API, which I'm doing here with this R node, you can easily bring that data in as well. This is an example of the scaling the unicorn in a sense. You saw earlier I had this little note to Susan that I've added the weather data and holiday data via open source APIs. And Susan, as a user, since this particular R node has been parameterized, all she has to do is put in what the start date and end dates are, and she can simply run the node. What's happening here is I've inserted my R code here, and then I've created the parameters for Susan here. However, this is an option. It certainly doesn't have to be done with parameter. I can simply drop the code in it itself. And I can even shut that piece of it down on the node, right? Because Susan doesn't necessarily, she's not interested, let's suppose she's not interested in this particular code. I can lock that down where Susan just sees this. She doesn't, she only sees what she needs to see or wants to see here. And similar with this Python node down here. Here I have similar situation where I'm using Pandas, and I'm using the Pandas library, and I'm grabbing essentially a data set and determining whether a variable is, if a date is a holiday or a weekend within Pandas. So really easy to do. And I can select my different types of languages too. If I'm using the Iron Python implementation, I can specify that here. Here I'm using C 2713 for my particular instance. But then you can also see that these nodes don't have to be just R or Python. You can create C# nodes, SVB nodes, etc. So, and then one of the other things that Shawn was just talking about is the marketplaces. So we do support within the platform several of these different marketplaces, like H2O, and then we also we certainly have our own all of our own algorithms as well, and those can be done here. If I want to drop in, say, an Apervita node, if I'm using Apervita, then I can do that directly within a workspace. So I just hook up my Apervita node to my cleansed data, whatever data source I have, and input my API key. This is all, again, credentials, my credentials, and it's within a very nice structured node option. So we can do that as well. Then the other thing that I would like to show briefly is this, let me pull up a more complicated workflow. This is an interesting use case where essentially doing unsupervised training for claims data. I'm doing a V-fold cross-validation clustering model. I'm then defining a target, and then I'm using Statistica, 3 different algorithms in the tool itself, a chain model, a boosted tree model, and a neural network. And I now have a supervised method of machine learning. However, if there's simple things that I want to do here along with that analysis, I can, for example, do text mining within Statistica, but if and that functionality exists. But if I want to do something like, sentiment analysis using the text blob function within Python, I can do that as well. So all of that information is available. And then I get an output report that I can look at. Both native, this text mining is native to Statistica. I've got all sorts of model evaluation techniques, built within Statistica, my neural nets, etc. So highly scalable. It allows you to use the best of open source and the best of the analytic marketplaces at the same time with a validated solution that is secure and extensible.
Scott, thanks. I'm going to touch on our last topic today, which is this enablement or helping this new group of users take advantage of advanced analytics. Gartner likes to call them citizen data scientists. They might be power users, business analysts, data analysts within a business unit. But the bottom line is that the world has shifted, and that while data scientists will always lead this parade, there are other people in it. And in order to kind of enable and to scale forward our advanced analytics strategies, it's really very important that you're providing the right environment for a wider use or a wider group of users. And Scott just touched on a few of these again, and as you've seen in the first two demos, you've got to have a sort of BI-style user experience and user interface. And that's becoming more and more important as this group of users sort of becomes more democratized in a wider group. They have this expectation of a certain level of data visualization. They want to have interactivity with the data, and they want to be able to go off and tell the story or consume the insights in a way that makes sense to them as a business user. So, you know, I think that that's become more important over the last handful of years as this wider group of people have kind of come into play here in the advanced analytics space. Scott just mentioned the ability to lock down processes and also to expose processes in a role-based sort of way. That's something that Statistica has been focused on for a while. So you can see Statistica in a very large, broad data science sort of optic, or we can actually scale Statistica down in a role-based sort of way to make it a little bit easier for citizen data scientists to consume and interact with the data. And we can also abstract some of that complexity and make it easier for them to consume things from a data scientist. And so this reusability and these data science-driven templates act almost like recipes in sort of a way. And I often tell this story when I'm trying to relay to people exactly how important this is, and it kind of relays itself to, say, you know, a fancy restaurant, a four-star restaurant. The four-star restaurant is always going to be run on the reputation, deep insight, and fantastic skill set of the chef or the data scientist in our world, correct? So as this chef brings all of this knowledge into the restaurant, it's their job to be able to empower more people around them to meet the needs of the overall environment. And so chefs start to pass on their insights to sous chefs and assistant chefs within the organization. And we see the very same thing happening in our most successful data science implementations, where the data scientist is playing the role of the chef and is enabling a wider group of people to help serve the consumer you know, in the restaurant or in the enterprise. And it may be sort of a silly way to talk about it, but the bottom line is not everyone needs to be a chef, and not everybody is going to have the skill set of a data scientist. So nowadays, the new strategy is, how do you scale the data scientist up so that they can get more work done? And we've talked about a few of those things today, right? Make it easier and simpler to get at the data, but then make that data preparation repeatable for people that are at a different level. Put together, you know, these types of very dynamic and complex workflows or models, and then be able to condense the models into a single node and allow these power users to come in and then simply benefit from all of the work that the data scientist did. And when you do that, you get this repeatability, but you also get consistency and speed. And that consistency and speed, of course, creates more trust, gets more people to adopt, and kind of fuels that new analytic strategy of where we're trying to take advantage of the algorithm economy, right? Where we're trying to get more of our processes and more of our business to be infused with advanced analytics. And that's what most companies are struggling with. So you need to have these things that help you scale. And for us, we see this as being important, you know, in role-based UIs and wizards, BI-style dashboards and visualizations, you know, being able to interactively enable a large group of people, but to maintain some governance and kind of create that same environment that you would see in a Class A restaurant. We'll always have a chef, but the chef has to take on a role of enablement more today in the enterprise than they have in the past. Being the lone wolf data scientist works in some environments, but in larger enterprises, you're going to need to have some of the tools that we've been talking to today. And I think that that's why it's so important for us to be able to sort of enable this new group of users. And I think it's probably one of the most exciting parts of what's happening in our industry today is this idea of being able to say, look, you know, we understand that there's a much bigger group of people that want to get value from our data, and we need to be able to enable that on multiple levels. So, Scott, I'm going to let you talk to this last point, and then hopefully we'll have a few minutes for Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Shawn. So, and let me just go ahead and lead with the fact that we're only able to touch on a very few parts of what the power of Statistica really is. And so we would love the opportunity to provide you with a demo specific to your domain or business case, and you have our contact information, and we can certainly do that. I'm going to give an abbreviated example here where I've created a cleaning of a data set, right? And I'm a data scientist, and you can imagine this could be much more complex, right? And I have even said here that, you know, if you have questions, give me a call. So what this does is it goes through a process and it cleans data, and then at the end I get an output data set. So what I can do within Statistica is I can create an external node, an external workspace with this node right here, and I can provide this simple two-node workspace to a colleague, and with instructions it says add your data as an upstream document and press play. This node will clean your data outlier, sparsity, etc. So it's basically doing what I did up here. So if I am a new user, or I just want to be able to use something that I want to be able to use something that a data scientist has created. I don't have domain knowledge or expert knowledge of this particular piece of it. Someone can package this piece up, and then all I have to do is connect it to the data flow. So in this node that I've been given, just to look underneath the hood, it is referencing the above workspace within Enterprise. It's telling it where to connect the data and what to output it as. So if I execute this workspace right here, what I've done is I've executed this entire branch, which could be very elaborate. In fact, you could have underlying external workspaces within here, so you can embed one to another, to another, to another. And this allows you to be much more productive because you can share this IP. And to Shawn's point, it's essentially a reproducible benefit as well, because once I've designed this, and everybody agrees in the organization that this is the way it ought to be done, or maybe Scott has done this before and he knows what he's talking about, then you can reuse these templates. So this is an example of enabling the citizen data scientist by creating these executable workspaces. Okay? And then I'm just going to shut these down. And then the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what a parameterized workspace looks like. And I believe I have that in Enterprise as well. I have some of these objects locally, and some of them not seeing my workspace. Give me just a sec. This is an example, another example of what we're doing to try to create the democratization of analytics within an organization. So if you look at the way that Statistica normally uses nodes, if I go in here to a subset node, this is the look that I normally have, and I can do whatever I want to do there. But we have this ability to enable user views. So if I go within a user view, I can specify very, very specific and discrete options within the workspace. So instead of seeing everything under a full view, which if I'm doing something like some sort of advanced neural net or whatever, I may not know what all these parameters mean. So by setting the parameters in a view, if I'm a designer, I can choose the options that I want a user to see. So maybe I allow them to select the variables, I allow them to select certain features, and then I lock this into a parameterized workspace so that when a user comes in, they see a much simpler interface. They select the 3 or 4 options that they want to use, and then they can execute. So it simplifies them. You have all the power of Statistica, but for a domain expert that needs a simple interface, that's allowable within the platform. And then, Paul, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Scott. We do have a few questions here. We're at the Q&A portion of our webcast, so we've got a few minutes to go. There are some practical questions here. Can your package read in and export SPSS files? That's the SAV format files out of SPSS.
So we can read in SPSS data within the platform, but we can write the data out to an SPSS format as well. Yes, for the data side, we don't write SPSS code.
Okay. If the attendee has any follow-up questions there, go ahead and post that in the box for us. And another question here is really about feature changes for 13.2.1. Are you able to say anything there about what features are new in 13.2.1 compared to 13.2?
A couple of the features that I just showed, the parameterized workspaces were a new feature. The execution of an embedded workspace that I showed, that's new. Annotations were something that was new, but we can certainly follow up with a broader list if someone wants the full list of the capabilities.
Right, and that's something that's not necessarily addressed on this call here, but could be provided via email.
Right, and the other thing is, so the general scripting host, I believe, was all available in 13.1, the ability to do C#. So I don't think that was a 13.2 feature. I apologize, it just kind of all merges together in my head.
Oh, that's understandable. Our initial asker about the SPSS files here says he's talking about data files, not code in SPSS, so specifically the SAV files.
Yes. Yes, we can read those in and write to them.
All right. And another input-output question. Can you create and output results to dashboards?
Yes. So something that we really didn't show at all today is we have inherently, and it's included in your license, the ability to create dashboards and even streaming data dashboards as well. And then if you currently are using Click or Tableau, we can source that data that you can connect in directly as well. So you have options. That's what we really try to do, is we try to provide as many options to our customers as possible.
And what about Mac operating system compatibility?
No, we don't operate on a Mac.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if you could run an emulator, but we certainly couldn't guarantee it.
And either one of you address this one here. Toby asks that it sounds good in theory to use Statistica to enable our users and Python users to share code in one platform. So are there any companies out there that are actually putting this in practice with Statistica?
I'll touch on it first. I'll let Scott talk about it more from a technical viewpoint. But yeah, many companies are, and it's for the same reason that I mentioned. It's the data scientists want to have a certain amount of flexibility and approach to how they do their work. And many of today's data scientists are coming out of school with an understanding and a competency and a reliance upon R. And it's important, I think, for us not to try to change the specific tools that a particular data scientist is using, but to allow them to get greater benefit from them, especially in an enterprise sort of world. And so what we see the executive levels doing, who are folks that are looking at a more strategic view of advanced analytics, is it's kind of like when we were kids. We had a really great time when we got let out of school and we got to go play outside and have a good time, and we never really felt that terribly constrained. We didn't feel like anybody was kind of, you know, disallowing us from having fun or having our moments. And we want to do the same thing for the community of people that are using whatever tool they're using. So we didn't mind at recess that there was a fence in the distance, and we like and see a lot of customers using Statistica as that platform of record, that sort of fence, a little bit of governance, a little bit of standardization and monitoring, and perhaps even more importantly, an ability to sort of supercharge some of these tools that people are using. So the short answer is yes, we have reference customers that are doing this in extremely large and sophisticated organizations. This seems to be the best practice that is becoming prevalent amongst companies that want to be more widespread with their advanced analytics. They don't want to curtail the tools that people bring to the job. They just want to put a fence around it a little bit to make sure that from an enterprise standpoint, it is something that makes sense for them. Scott could talk a little bit about how we track and audit and how we're able to become that platform of record when people use us as that sort of central place. And I'll let him kind of talk about our metadata repository and things of that nature.
Sure. So just a couple of quick comments. We do allow for full auditing, full lineage of the modeling process. There's version control. We have approval levels within enterprise where models, before they're pushed into production, must be approved. Within rules base, we can use the latest model or the last approved model. But you can see the full lineage of model development, who has access to that, even the data sources, when the connections were made, when they were changed. So all of that exists within what we call our SDMS system. And so yeah, it's basically the best of both worlds. Use open source where it makes sense or where you want to use it, but then have this secure, validated system that encloses it.
I'm going to have to sadly cut us off here because we're starting to run over time. Folks have other meetings to go to, and a variety of questions have been flowing in here while you guys were talking over the last 2 minutes, and so we are definitely not going to be able to get to all these questions. We have recorded these, and I went ahead and popped up the thank you screen to Scott and Shawn's email addresses down there. So some of these conversations may have to be taken offline. Scott, I will collect these questions and send them to both you and Shawn, and maybe you all can divvy up and help these folks out with some answers. Some of these questions can go to our community forum. I think I provided that link a little earlier in the Q&A box as well, especially if it's sort of a how-to question. I've got Statistica, how do I do this? community, our user community forum is very good for that. We have a variety of people that keep on top of that all the time. Our website, of course, is statistica.io. Here we go. Statistica.io. You can go out there and find general overviews about 13.2, and there's some links on this page here. Do a screenshot real quick for product support and some additional documentation, data sheets and white papers and such. But you can start there. And I'm going to go ahead and close this out now. I appreciate everybody calling in today and joining us for this. As a reminder, I follow-up email with the recorded version and probably a PDF of our slides as well will be sent to you early next week. So make a note of Scott's email address down here. He wanted me to make sure to put it on here, scott.burk@quest.com. If you have any other questions that are technical in nature, and of course Shawn.Rogers@quest.com. We'll be happy to talk to anyone about trends in the marketplace. So thank you all again for joining us, and have a productive day.
Thank you.